Thanks is the magic word that turns what I have into everything I need. That's the key. Why? What's so magical about gratitude? Why do we have a holiday dedicated to it other than commemorating the pilgrims and the natives getting together? Listen, because gratitude takes our eyes off of ourselves and it puts them on the Lord. That's what gratitude does. It takes our eyes off the bread and onto the baker. It takes our eyes off of the gifts and onto the giver, and that changes things. Well, hey, it's Thanksgiving this week. Because of that, there's just this idea of gratitude, of thankfulness in the air. We're singing songs about gratitude. You're going to hear it, at work or at school this week of like, hey, it's the season of being thankful. And that's great. Or hopefully what you do around the Thanksgiving table is something we try to remember to do in our family, which is like, hey, what are you thankful for? But today, I want to take a look at the question behind the question. Why should we be grateful? And not just because because God's given us stuff. No, I mean can we we're going to get a little selfish for a minute. The question is hey, what's in it for me? What does gratitude do to me? And the title of this week's message is really what we're getting at. What is the goal of gratitude? So jot that down, the goal of gratitude, because that's what we're going to talk about this week. But I want to get a start. Now that you've gotten to know each other, I want to get an idea of who we have in the room. So we need some audience participation here. So single people, raise your hand real quick. Singles in the room, great. Just keep them up, and then just take a peek around while your hand's up. Better here than in the bar, I'm just saying. Okay. All right, next up. Married but no kids. Married but no kids, raise your hand. Okay, put them down. How about you have kids at home with you in the house? Kids in the house? All right, everyone's mostly like this side. How about this? You have kids, but I'll put it this way. Empty nesters, but not yet grandparents. Empty nesters, but not yet grandparents, okay? And then finally, grandparents. Grandparents, where are you at? Oh, awesome. Now, here's what happened during that. We started out, and it was funny, and it was like, oh, yeah, single people. And then, did you notice it got we kept smiling, but it got a little awkward as we went? Because here's what happens. The single people are like, yeah, that's me, this is fun. And then it's like, hey, married people, and you're like, oh, okay, thanks. Thanks for reminding me, Pastor, that I got to go to another Thanksgiving table this year saying, nope, still single. But then the married people, and I'm like, married people, but no kids. And you're like, oh, you brought that up. All right, okay. First of all, I got to see a baby dedication. Now we got to remember that, we're trying. And then it's like, hey, who's got kids? Who's got kids at home? You're like, yeah, it's us. And it's like, all right, who were the empty nesters? And those of us with kids at home, we're like, what is that like? Do you just run naked through the halls all day? But those empty nesters are like, yeah, that's us, until I say, where's the grandparents? And they're like, oh, my daughter's been married for 10 minutes and has not given me a grandbaby yet. I want to be a grandparent. And because see, what's baked into it is the idea of whatever stage of life we're at, wherever we are, there seems to be a different stage. We kind of think, oh man, if I was only there. If I had that, man, that would be better. We want the next step. We want a different step. But it's not just relational. It's not just in relationships. It's in a lot of areas. Okay, here's another one. Raise your hand if you make over $150,000. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Instead, what I want you to do is take a moment and cast your mind back to your first job. First job. Think about it here. I remember mine. It was at Trumbull's Family Restaurant in Albert Lea, Minnesota. I was a busboy. I had to wear black jeans and a teal polo shirt. I looked like I worked at SeaWorld. But it was a great first job because it was 1997. And in 1997, an amazing thing happened. On September 1st, 1997, they raised the minimum wage to $5.15 an hour. That means all I had to do was work a 4-hour shift, and I could go and get the next Smash Mouth CD at Sam Goody, right? Where's my 90s kids? So I get that job and I'm excited. And then my buddy gets a job across town at a little cafe. And he's like, yeah, it's a great job. It's pretty good. I make $6 an hour. I'm like, $6? What would I do with an extra 85 cents? And so you work hard. Maybe you get a raise. Maybe you get a different job. And so then you got $6 and you make it $8. Then you think, oh man, if only I made $10 an hour, just a nice round number. Oh, if only I had a salary, then I could actually budget. Then I would know what's coming in each month. And you get a salary. Then you're like, oh, if only that salary was like $20K. Oh, if only I could get up to like $35K. Wouldn't that be great? Oh, if only now that there were benefits. If I had a health plan, oh, that'd be great. Okay, I got the health plan, but man, I wish, if only I had dental. If only I had vision. There just seems to be this thing of like, once I get there, then I'll be happy. Well, I've got good news for you. Psychologists at the university, or at Purdue University and the University of Virginia analyzed a whole bunch of Gallup poll data, and they put it all into a big mathematical equation, and they even broke it down by area to find out the ideal salary that leads to life satisfaction. And so they have like a national one, and then they zeroed in on our area. So I found it. Here's the ideal salary for the Chattanooga area for life satisfaction. Here's what it is. It is $107,030. $107,030. How does that hit you? Because my guess is if you're making less than $107,30, you're like, that's about right. Yeah, that's right. But if you're at or above 107, you're like, is that per person? Do they have kids? Do those kids have bracelets? Like, you're trying to do the math. So you're like, well, that number doesn't make sense. Well, then what does that number tell us? What do our reactions to that number tell us? Does it mean that those making less than 107 are a little greedy because they want to be at 107? Does it make those who are making more than 107 saying, well, you're greedy because you're not satisfied with what you were just told would make you satisfied? No, our reactions just prove what we should already know. That number is garbage. That number is just a mathematical equation they plugged into a computer. In fact, someone else wrote an article at the American Economic Journal that was a rebuttal to that study. And they said, that's a ridiculous study. And here's what they said. They said, according to our data, the relationship between well-being and income is roughly linear. Meaning, do you want to be happy? Keep going up and to the right. And then they had this sentence. This is in the journal. If there is a satiation point, if there is a point of life satisfaction, we are yet to reach it. These are economists at a secular university, and they see a truth that has been around since the beginning of time. It was back there in the garden, Adam and Eve, Genesis chapter 2. God tells them, hey, look around. All this is for you, and you can eat of any tree in the garden. But there is the tree of good, of the knowledge of good and evil. You can't eat from that one. What's the one temptation that came along? Serpent comes up and be like, oh, I bet if you had that, you'd be happy. Oh, you can do this? That's great, but that's what you don't have. Because you do that, then you'll be like God. Right? And the temptation creeps in to tell us, if I could only do that, have that, get that, earn that, then if I was only there, I'd be happy. So what do we do? Because I think most of us are like, I feel that. What do we do? Well, I don't know about you, but I have found when life throws questions at me, I can find answers in God's word. And the Apostle Paul once wrote a letter to the church at Philippi. And in this letter, he starts to thank them because they've just been generous in giving to him and providing for him. And in the middle of his thank you note, he says something pretty amazing. We'll put it on the screen here so you don't have to turn there. This is Philippians 4. He says, not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. And guess what? Paul just gave us the answer to our question. Paul just gave us the answer to our title. The goal of gratitude, note takers, write this down, is contentment. Oh, what a disappointed look everyone's got on their face. You'll think I can't see you up here. I can see you up here. And I just saw a bunch of people go, oh, okay. This is what we're going to talk about. It's Thanksgiving week, Brian. I got people coming. I gotta take out a second mortgage just to buy enough food for the people coming to my house. I gotta clean because I know there's gonna be comments. We just had an election, so that's gonna be a fun conversation. And this is what's coming ahead of me. And I come here and you're gonna talk to us about contentment? No. This is the week we need like the really good verses. This is the week we need those exciting verses, those lift your spirits verses like I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. That's what you should be preaching on this week. You're right, I probably should. Asher, would you show us the very next verse in Philippians 4? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That verse. The verse we put on locker rooms and coffee cups and motivational posters. The verse that has become synonymous with doing and getting more. That's a verse about contentment. Paul says, I can do all things, even fight my sin nature through Christ. I can do all things, even overcome the relentless pursuit of more because of Christ. Even this, that's how hard it is. That's how serious it is. And so today, we're going to talk about contentment. Because it's the goal of gratitude. But in order to even talk about contentment, there's some things we need to learn about it. Because we need to learn about what contentment is, but also we got to learn about what contentment is not. So note takers, first thing I need you to write down is this. Contentment is not what you think. It's not what you think it is. Because when I say the word content, what comes to mind is not super exciting, is it? Right, if you doubt me on that, just the next time you got an anniversary rolling around, write to your wife, honey, when I'm with you, I'm content. See how that goes for you. Because listen, the word contentment has come to mean in our culture and our lexicon means it's okay. I'm content. I can settle for this, I guess. But listen, that is not the kind of contentment that the Bible talks about. That's not what Paul is writing about. See, Paul uses a Greek word here when he says content, and the word is autarkes, and it means contentment. That's how we translate it, but the definition behind, the word picture behind autarkes is this: a perfect condition of life in which no aid or support is needed. That's a little different. That's an anniversary card that might work. Honey, when I'm with you, I'm in the perfection. Nothing else is needed. There's an anniversary card for you, right? That's lock the door, right? So we need a new definition of contentment as we see it in God's word. Here is our working definition for tonight. I'll put it on the screen so you can write it down. Contentment is not settling for what you're stuck with. It's unlocking the joy in what you've been given. Let me say that again. Contentment is not settling for what you're stuck with. It's unlocking the joy in what you've been given. It's a decision to experience, think back to the definition of the word, the perfect condition that we're already in. That is a game changer. So we got to fix our definition because contentment is not what you think it is. But the second thing we need to learn about contentment is this. Contentment is better. Contentment is better. Now, what do I mean by that? It seems kind of like an open-ended statement. Well, something we've seen in our culture as a result of this relentless pursuit of more. And I don't think any of us would argue against that. Not only do we feel it, we see it everywhere. We see consumerism, we see hustle culture, we see just people turning themselves inside out for that next thing. And one of the reasons for that, or one of the ways that's affecting us, is we are living a marginless life. We are busier than we've ever been as a society in the pursuit of hustle. And while we're doing it, we are constantly comparing ourselves to others. I recently came across an article called Generation Discontent, why we're never happy with what we achieve. And it was this person saying, hey, this generation is the most discontented generation there's ever been. But they didn't have an answer. They were just like, I wonder why this is. And it blew me away because it's a short article. I'm reading this article. And in this article, it says, gee, it seems like we're always comparing ourselves to others and we're never happy with what we have. As I'm reading that article, there were 11 different advertisements, either next to it, beneath it, in the midst of it, or popping up over it. And all of it were things like, here, you need to buy some new clothing. Here's a new wallet to fit all your credit cards. Here's some new furniture you're going to be happy with for your house. Or, and there was interesting, there was 2 advertisements in an article about not being satisfied because others have something else. There were 2 advertisements that says, did you know you can now buy that sweater you saw Meghan Markle wearing? Click here. Do you see it? We're surrounded by it. It was no surprise then at the end of the article when it recommends other articles, the first one's like, if you liked this, you should probably read this. It was an article about how antidepressants work. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to grab everything with 2 hands. Because we think that more is better. But God reminds us, no, actually contentment is better. And for that, we look to the words of King Solomon, Ecclesiastes, on the screen here. Ecclesiastes 6:6. Solomon says, better 1 handful with tranquility than 2 handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. Do you hear that? 1 handful with tranquility, peace. Better than 2 handfuls by turning our life upside down, running on the never-ending treadmill of more, just chasing the elusive feeling of maybe 2 handfuls will be enough. And remember, Ecclesiastes, written by Solomon, the richest man in the history of the world. And he's saying, better 1 with tranquility. Contentment is better. Something else we need to understand about contentment. Contentment is learned. It doesn't come naturally, does it? Contentment is not the resting state of the human heart. What is wired in us is the need for more, right? Since the garden, here's what's the one thing you don't have, go to that. That's in us. That's that sin nature. But listen, though contentment is not the resting state of the human heart, it can be learned, and it needs to be learned. We opened with this reading from Paul. It's kind of our base text. I'm going to go back and just highlight one verse. It's verse 11. He says, not that I speak in regard to need, but I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. Paul makes it clear that this didn't come naturally to him. And if the Apostle Paul struggles with it, what chance do I have? But he says, no, I have learned. And that is why I have hope. I have hope because just like Paul, I can learn contentment. I have hope that just like Paul, I can unlock the joy in what I've been given, whether I abound or I'm abased, whether things are sitting pretty or there is not much in the bank account. Why? Because, like Paul, you and I can do all things through Christ who gives us strength, even this. And really what we're doing is we're starting with the why, because sometimes we've got to start with the why, right? Why can I be content? Because I have strength from Christ. Because otherwise, I'm like, to be honest, I'm looking on like, no, I do not have it in me to be a contented person. Can I just tell you that? Right? Because all of us are wired to look at that car, look at that family, look at that lawn, look at that. And all of us are just driven to move to the next thing. And I know that I don't have it in me, but I remember what Paul says, no. You can learn it because you can do all things, even this. It's not about winning football games, that verse. It's about even achieving contentment. So that's the why. I can learn contentment because I can do all things through Christ, but what's the how? Where does the rubber meet the road? How do I walk this out in my life? If this is the goal of gratitude, if this is what's behind everything we're talking about as far as for us, what we say at Thanksgiving, then how do I do this? So let's talk about 3 steps to grow in contentment. And I don't mean like step 1, step 2, step 3, you're done. I just mean, hey, here's 3 things that are going to help us on our journey. So step number 1 to contentment. Ready? Kill comparison. Ooh. Why is comparison so difficult? Because it is. It is. This is not in my notes, and it's always scary when I leave my notes, but I see my neighbor sitting back there. Y'all, a couple years ago, we put some money into our backyard to try to make it a nice place, but you should see his yard. It's amazing. I'm looking over like, oh, okay. That's what a backyard can look like. Okay. Got to work on this. Because there's something in us. We compare ourselves. Here's a better story. Years ago, if you don't know me, if we're new to one another, my wife and I have 7 children. And years ago, as our family was growing, in 1 year, because of an adoption and a birth, we went from 4 kids to 6 kids in the same calendar year. And we just outgrew everything. We outgrew our house. We had kids sleeping in closets. We're like, we got to get a place. And at the time, this is several years ago, it was cheaper to build a house than it was to try to buy a house that was big enough for us. Remember when you could afford a mortgage? It wasn't that long ago. Anyway, so we built this house because it was the most economical for us. But as we built this house, we were like, oh my goodness, can you believe? We got to build it like, we kept calling it our dream home and like, wow, this is great. This neighborhood, who'd have ever thought we could be in a neighborhood like this? And look at this, we love it. And every night I'd go to bed just like, thank you, Lord, that we get to be here. And then about a year after we moved in, we had some other friends with a family and they said, hey, come on over. We just built a house. Let's have dinner at our house. And so we start driving to their house. And I'll never forget the moment I pulled onto their property because you went through a bunch of trees, and then there was this like 4-acre clearing in the middle of it. And in the middle of this clearing, like all of your Pinterest boards come to life, was this big, beautiful white farmhouse with a wraparound porch, and it was incredible. And I remember what I said inside of myself as I drove in. I said, oh, that's what I want. I did. I remember the moment that my brain said, that's what I want. And so for the next several nights, I fell asleep in a bed in the house that every other night I've been like, thank you, God, I can't believe we get to live here. Now saying, oh, if we only had more land, the kids could, that porch was so much better than then we'd be happy. Teddy Roosevelt famously said, comparison is the thief of joy. And the joy I had in our sweet home had been stolen, not because of anything they'd done, but because I had allowed comparison to creep in. So we get our eyes on what other people have, and soon we allow it to steal all the joy from the beautiful things we've been given. But here's the thing, and here's what we got to remember. That family over there with the house, that guy over there with the girlfriend, that lady over there with the job, that whatever it is we're looking at, saying, oh, if only that's not your story. And this is really important to us because when we start thinking about our story, stuff makes more sense. Now, how many of you have read multiple books by the same author? Some of you are like, you lost me at multiple books. Okay. An example would be like I'm reading a Louis L'Amour Western book right now. My wife's grandfather passed away, and they sent us a bunch of his books. I've been tearing through them. I read like 10 this year. Louis L'Amour, one author, a bunch of different books. Maybe it's a series you've read, like Narnia or Lord of the Rings or 50 Shades. Just making sure you're awake, y'all. Some of you are getting a little quiet. Making sure you're paying attention. But here's the thing. If you've read multiple books by the same author, are all of those books exactly the same? No, if you read multiple books with the same author, you're like, that is exactly what was said here. No, that's exactly like this book. What would you say? You say, that's not a very good author. Well, listen, God is the author, and God is the good author. He doesn't write a bunch of the same books. He's writing something completely original and different in your life. But listen, your story, though it's not someone else's, your story has beauty in it. Your story has victory in it. Your story has the potential for peace-filled, joy-filled, state of perfection, lacking in nothing contentment. Right there, because he is carefully writing a story in your life that is no one else's and theirs isn't yours. We've got to get our noses out of somebody else's book and start living out the story he's writing in ours. This is the first step on our road to contentment. We've got to kill comparison because it's killing our joy. Second step, step 2, say the magic word. If you got kids in the house, what do you know? Manners, what's the magic word? Say the magic word. What's the magic word? Please. That's right. Well, with kids, the magic word is please. But when it comes to contentment, there's a different magic word. With contentment, the magic word is thanks. Thanks. Because listen, and this is what we get full circle here. Gratitude is the key that unlocks contentment. Thanks is the magic word that turns what I have into everything I need. Don't sleep on that statement because there's something there. That's probably worth writing down. I don't have a slide for it, but listen. Thanks is the magic word that turns what I have into everything I need. That's the key. Why? What's so magical about gratitude? Why do we have a holiday dedicated to it other than commemorating the pilgrims and the natives getting together? Listen, because gratitude takes our eyes off of ourselves and it puts them on the Lord. That's what gratitude does. It takes our eyes off the bread and onto the baker. It takes our eyes off of the gifts and onto the giver. And that changes things. We've been studying Paul's words to the church at Philippi here, right? And just a few verses later, right after he said, hey, I've been flush and I've been broke. Later on in the same chapter, he says this, I have everything I need and more than enough. And you're like, well, great. This is one of Paul's good moments in life. Paul's in a good place. He just received some help. So Paul's in a place, I've got everything I need and more than enough. Except Paul wrote the book of Philippians in prison. How could he have everything he needed and more than enough? He's probably chained to a prison guard at this point. You got to wonder what the prison guard was thinking. And Paul's writing, I have everything I need and more than enough. The prison guard's like, excuse me now? How can he say something like this? Listen, because Paul saw through the eyes of gratitude. And when he saw through the eyes of gratitude, his eyes were lifted off of what he was looking at and up to God. And he looks to God and says, I got everything I need. I got more than enough. What else could I even ask for? Thanks is the magic word. Gratitude is the key. Thanks is the magic word that turns what you have into everything you need. So, kill comparison. Then say the magic word. Third step to commitment, step 3, jump ship. And you're like, I feel it. I'm ready. You're like, no. Not jump ship like give up. No. We're talking about a specific ship here. We are jumping from one ship to another ship. This is something I learned from my pastor years ago. Listen, we need to jump from ownership to stewardship. And this changes so much. You remember the Old Testament, God's people had been taken away into exile. We call it the Babylonian captivity. For 70 years, they're gone. And then God allows his people through these nations to go back to the promised land. to go back to Jerusalem and to begin to rebuild and restore the old waste places there, specifically the temple. So Ezra and Nehemiah, they're working on the temple, and people are excited. People are like, oh, we get to do this. We get to have work on the house of God, and this is great. And they do that for 2 years. And then after 2 years, everything stops. And for the next 14 years, nothing happens. I shouldn't say nothing happens. No, they still kept on. But there was a change, and they said, you know what? These resources, this time I've got, it's not time for me to use this for God. We got to build our own houses. I got to work on my stuff. This is my stuff. I need it for me. I need it for my family. And so for 14 years, all the work on the house of the Lord stopped. My resources, my money, my time, ownership. Right? It's mine. And into this culture of ownership, God sent a prophet by the name of Haggai. And Haggai goes to these people, and through Haggai, God says to the people, he asks them a rhetorical question, basically this: how's that working out for you? 14 years of ownership. How's that working out? Here's Haggai 1, verses 5 and 6. Give careful thought to your ways. You've planted much, but you've harvested little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages only to put them in a purse with holes in it. Now, some of us are like that. That's what it feels like. But why is God saying this happens? Why? Listen, because ownership never satisfies. Ownership is built on a scarcity mindset that there's never enough, so I've got to keep any of God's gifts to myself. My time, my money, my resources, I got to spend it on me, use it for me, put it in a purse, put it in my bank account. But the problem is, what did God just say? There's holes in that purse. The tighter we hold on to what God's given us, our children, our family, our resources, our time, the more it flies away, because ownership never satisfies the soul. Not to mention, and here's the key, they didn't own the resources. They were in exile. They were in captivity. They had nothing. And when they came back, through God working, he had the kings give them resources to bring back. Everything they had was from God. And we're like, oh, well, that's what it was like for them. No, listen. We've got this idea of the self-made man or the self-made woman. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. I did it. So this time, this money, this is my life. We're deceiving ourselves. We're deceiving ourselves if we think that way. James, the half-brother of Jesus, made that clear in his book, verses 16 and 17 of James 1. He says, don't be deceived. Don't lie to yourself. My dear brothers and sisters, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights. He says it's not just God's people returning from captivity. If there's something good in your life, it's from God. You got some time on your hands, it's from God. You got money in the bank account, it's from God. You get a paycheck, it's from God. You got a vehicle, you got a family, you got children, it's from God. So what do? How do we escape the deception of ownership, as James calls it? How do we escape the dissatisfaction of ownership like Haggai wrote about? We jump ship. We jump from ownership to stewardship. Stewardship. It's a mindset shift. Now, we realize that if every good and perfect gift is from above, then we are not owners, we are stewards. Now, stewards is a word that we don't use a lot anymore. But a steward is someone who watches over, uses, or manages the resources provided by someone else. Now, there's a fantastic example of this in John chapter 6, but I don't want to pre-teach our Abide series that's continuing on after Christmas. So instead of that, I want to give you kind of the key to it. The key is a steward knows that everything they have is not their own. I mean, you look at the baby dedication we had. That was the whole point of it. Hey, this child in my arms is not my own. So we're here dedicating them back. You have lent them to me. I lend them back to you, Lord. If nothing is mine, if everything comes from you, then I can be truly open-handed in entrusting them, entrusting it to God. So we use what we're stewarding under the instructions of the one who's given it. So we steward the resources God has given us generously because he's a generous God. And listen, that means we have the freedom. That's the beautiful thing about stewardship. It is incredibly freeing because there's no longer the scarcity mentality. This is mine. Now it's the stewardship mentality. This is his. And I can be free with this. I can give, invest to the kingdom because he's the one who provided everything. Every gift was from him in the first place. And check this out. The writer of Proverbs tells us what happens when we do that. In fact, he contrasts the two mindsets, right? He talks about the ownership mindset and he contrasts it with the stewardship mindset. In Proverbs 11, he says, there's one who scatters, yet increases more. That's the stewardship. I've got the seed from the master, and I'm going to scatter the seed, and as a result, there's going to be a harvest from what I've done. Stewardship. And there's one who withholds more than is right, but it leads to poverty. He says the one who stewards, the one who scatters, man, he increases. The one who holds tight with that ownership mentality, that just leads him to poverty because it slips through his grasp because ownership doesn't satisfy the soul. There's purpose found. There's blessing found. There's deep life satisfaction found when we realize that every good and perfect gift is from above and we become stewards, not owners. Do you see how that would lead to contentment? Do you see that it's not some race against someone else? It's because this is what God has entrusted, and I can just use it as he wants me to. So there's the goal of gratitude, contentment. We talked about what contentment is. It's not what we think. It's better. We got some steps that we can grow in contentment, but I want to get really practical. Because this isn't just about like a knowledge download. This is about where we say, okay, what do I do with this now? Because if it's literally a game changer, if it's a life changer to grow in contentment, then maybe we should take some steps in it. So here's 3 challenges for your week. You're like, I got a lot to do this week. I get it. These are perfect for Thanksgiving week. But they are challenges, and they're going to be tough. All right. The first thing we had was kill comparison. So what's our challenge for kill comparison? Here you go. Challenge number 1, avoid comparison zones for 1 week. Now, there's a picture there of someone on their phone. For a lot of us, that's a good place to start. But that's not the only thing. There's some of you are like, I can't avoid comparison zones. I got a bunch of siblings coming to the house on Thanksgiving. And I understand. As much as it is up to you, find those places that draws you to compare to others. For some of y'all, it's the TV. Right? For some of you, you got to like turn off Chip and Joanna working on that house and look around at the house God's given you. Right? And then with all that free time, you can put up some shiplap or something. But we get our eyes on someone else and we start forgetting what we've been given. Now, for some of us, it is the phone. It is social media. Excuse me. For some of us, you need to take a break. And maybe it's just like, okay, from now through Thanksgiving, I'm logging off. That's fine. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's not. It's not a challenge for a specific. It's a challenge for you to find where that comparison zone is in your heart and to do it. To stop comparing the highlight reel of someone else to the blooper reel you see around you. To stop comparing their edited square with your unedited life. And then you remember, if they had just moved the phone 6 inches to the right, it would have been a very different picture. But who cares Because it's not your story. That's their story. And you've got a story that God has for you to live. You're not called to live their story. God's writing yours. So avoid comparison zones for 1 week, however that applies to you. Okay, what was step number 2? Say the magic word. Here's your challenge. Challenge number 2. For 1 day this week, only pray thanks. There happens to be a day this week where this should be really easy. At least we think it will be. One day this week, only pray thanks. Now, for some of us, it's just like, oh yeah, I should remember to pray. For others of us, this is what this means. It means when we get up in the morning and we're getting ready for the day. Say it's Thanksgiving. Say you take Thanksgiving. You're like, I'm going to do that. I'm only going to pray thanks on Thanksgiving. Okay. Then that means that the repetition, the things of like, oh God, don't let them bring up such and such. Oh, I hope that, no. That means you time out all that stuff. And you say, God, thank you that there's people coming to this house this week. Thank you that I get to go to so-and-so's house this week. Wow, my kids are loud today. Lord, thank you for the noise, because that shows me there's a bunch of kids in this house. Lord, thank you for the coffee that is getting me through this day. Lord, thank you that we get to leave by 4, like whatever it is. But what we need to do is we need to say, for 1 day, I'm only praying Thanksgiving prayers. And what that's going to do in us, hopefully, is to start to train something up. So that on the other days, there's just a little bit more of those Thanksgiving prayers. And gratitude begins to rise, and we start to say the magic word, thanks, a little bit more than we did before. So there's challenge number 2. Step number 3 was jump ship. Challenge number 3, this week, take a step in stewardship. And someone's thinking, oh, there it is. It was just a giving message. Okay, they're asking for money. No, it's not what I'm saying. Now, listen, at the house, we believe that part of just a healthy relationship with Jesus is to steward our resources as he gives them. That means to be generous givers, beginning with the local church and out from there. So for some, maybe that is your first step of stewardship this week. But it's not the only step of stewardship. For some, it could be something totally different. For some, you're like, I'm already been doing that. Great. What is a step of stewardship? And you're like, remember what stewardship is, right? It means it's not mine, it's his. This is not ownership mentality. This is stewardship. He's given me something. What do I do with it? How do I scatter that he says that we would receive more? Maybe something real practical. Maybe someone down your street, you found out they have a new baby. And so you're like, all right, we're bringing them Chick-fil-A one night. We're going to let them know, hey, Chick-fil-A's coming. What do you like? Front door step. Love you. That's stewardship, right? That's saying, here's the gifts we've been given. I got time. I have the ability to run out of the house without a baby on my hip right now. I've got a little bit of scratch, and so I can take that, and I can give them that. Maybe it's stewarding your time. And you got a neighbor who's healing from something. You got a neighbor, you're like, hey, let me help break those leaves. Could be anything. The idea is this. So many of us are on autopilot of ownership. Because that's the resting place. It's just everything we see, we think about, this is mine, right? That's my bank account. That's my time. That's my car. And we need to do something that's going to turn off the autopilot that reminds us, oh, every good and perfect gift is from God. God, how do you want me to use this? So what's your step of stewardship this week? I challenge you to take it. Because contentment is learned. It's not natural. We've got to take steps. But we can, because we can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. Contentment is better. Better is one handful with tranquility. Does the word tranquility sound nice this time of year? The busiest, lousiest, crazy, I was going to say loudest, and lousiest came out. Paging Dr. Freud. Okay. tranquility. Tranquility with one handful, than the grasping at two. And contentment is not what we think it is. Maybe that's just for someone tonight. Maybe that's just what you need to walk away with. Contentment is not settling for what I'm stuck with. This life, this job, these kids, this spouse, this house. It's not settling for what I'm stuck with. It's unlocking the joy in what I've been given, the state of perfection where I am lacking nothing because it's all His. Because contentment is the beautiful, life-changing, satisfaction-giving goal of gratitude. And it will change our life. So it is worth seeking out. Hey everybody, Pastor Brian here. Thanks so much for checking out this teaching from the house. Look, if something stood out to you, ministered to you, or maybe you could use some prayer or have some more questions about Jesus, drop us a line. info@thehousechat.com. That's chat with 2 T's. Now, if you want to support the ministry God is doing here at the house, or just get a whole bunch more information on who we are as a church, you can head to thehousechat.com. Have a great week.